Left Field Investors is a community dedicated to limited partner investors who are interested in building wealth through real estate investing. The community is focused on education, networking, and engagement with quality operators and partners. We provide tools, webinars, and a forum where members can discuss everything related to real estate investing, including deals, operators, investment strategies, and much more. Coming soon, we're adding a new tool, sponsor reviews. This will be a place where our members can rate and review operating partners to further help each other in our investment journeys. Check us out at leftfieldinvestors.com.
For an LP, I would say make sure that the sponsor, has some experience and knows what they're doing, but also has a business plan for that development.
Hello, Left Fielders. Welcome to the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast. Our community is focused on networking and education to help people invest passively and think differently. Let's go.
Hi, this is Tom Wheelwright, and you're listening to Passive Investing from Left Field podcast.
I'm pleased today to have Andrew Brewer with us. He is the founder and managing partner of IronGall Investments, a real estate development firm based in Austin, and Distance 3 Development, a real estate investment firm based in San Antonio. As a developer and project sponsor, Andrew has helped hundreds of busy professionals achieve time and financial freedom through passive real estate investments in the markets across the United States. He has experience in apartments, townhomes, single-family homes, subdivisions, mobile home parks, RV parks, and office warehouse spaces. So he does it all. Andrew, welcome to the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the first question I always ask is if you can kind of go over your journey. How'd you get into real estate? How'd you get into development and all the other stuff you're doing? And how'd you become an operator? So if you can kind of give us the story there behind that, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. So I got interested in investing in real estate, I guess about 10 years ago. I was about 20. My wife actually really turned me on to it. And so, I started doing some reading in college, but wasn't super serious about it at that time, just trying to get through school. I worked full time through school also. But as soon as I graduated, my first professional job out of college was as a building engineer. So I was working in the tallest building in San Jose, California, started there as a utility engineer and worked my way up to be the assistant chief engineer. So that was really a job involving, basically asset management of a large commercial facility. So I did that as my professional job for about 4 years. At the same time that I started that job, I dove into real estate investing there. Kind of started off, single family and small multifamily, and then kind of grew from there. I was initially, since I was living in California, I was investing out of state in Kansas City in small properties. Really quickly realized that wasn't the path for me. So, kind of bought some properties, held them for a little bit, sold them, and really decided that I wanted to do bigger projects. While I was working in San Jose, I also acted as a consultant on construction defect litigation lawsuits and as a project manager for reconstruction projects. So, I had a good professional basis there in asset management, project management, and also, construction assets. Really seeing, what goes wrong when construction isn't done right, what the ramifications of that can be, what the effects of that are, what to look out for. And then since I had also had experience investing my own money in my own projects, I really just took those two sets of knowledge and just stuck them together and formed IronGall Investments, because I could look at projects from the point of view of the asset manager and the person running the project, but also from the point of view of the owner or the person that's putting in the money. So combining those allowed me to start my company, continue to work my job and work on projects in IronGall for a couple of years. And then eventually I had enough, deal flow and projects that I could leave my W-2 job, which I did back in 2021. I moved from San Jose out to Austin, Texas. I have a lot of family here in Austin, and it's also a great market to be in for real estate. And I just, I like Texas. So it was a very natural move to me, a lot of factors pulling me here. So for the last 4 years or so, I've been here in Austin and doing projects.
And talk about what kind of projects you do. Are you mostly doing development, and if so, what are the things that investors, LPs, need to know before investing in ground up development deals?
Yeah, I do. So I do. I have two kind of wings. One is development. So I'll develop multifamily projects, townhome projects, and single family home subdivisions. And then I also buy and hold RV parks and mobile home parks. I've been an asset manager for multifamily. I have a couple multifamily assets in my portfolio, but focusing on acquiring RV parks and mobile home parks, and then building projects as well. I would say, for the LP investing in development projects, it's not necessarily any riskier than a multifamily project if you know what you're doing. And that's kind of the real key. So when I'm putting a project together and I have investors on almost all of my deals, one of the things that I make sure that I put out to them is, hey, I've done the due diligence on this project. This project is solid. I've already talked to the city. I have, what the plan is going to be. And we're just basically following a checklist once we close on the property. We're not closing on the property and then trying to figure out what to do with it. One thing that I see from some other folks that try to do development is they don't really have a concrete plan going in. They're kind of like, we're going to buy this and we're going to try to do this. And if it doesn't work, we're going to do that. And if it doesn't work, we're going to do that. And so LPs really have no idea what to expect there. And if you don't read the fine print in those kinds of deals, it really gives you this big range of returns. It'll be like, well, if we, do exactly what we're hoping, you'll 5x your money or whatever. But if we don't, then you'll probably lose it. And I come in very much like, this is the business plan. This is the project that we're doing. These are the returns based on that. And it's, there is an actual business plan. It's not kind of shooting from the hip. So for an LP, I would say make sure that the sponsor, has some experience and knows what they're doing, but also has a business plan for that development. Make sure that they have their professional services lined up. Their engineers, architects, MEP consultants, zoning consultants, entitlement attorneys, anything that's going to be needed. Make sure that they're working with reputable companies that also have a good track record. Because the developer isn't the one sitting there, drafting all of the construction documents and everything. They're relying on their team. And I do that as well. I mean, it's a large project. One person can't do it all. So you want to make sure that there's also a solid team of professionals behind that developer. If it's just kind of a small fly-by-night firm or some, friend of a friend, or potentially, a small one-man operation that may, get overloaded or get delayed or something could happen to that person. Those are all risk factors that make development far riskier. So those are some of the basic things that I tell LPs to look out for, even if they're not investing with me. I just say, hey, make sure of this. And I've had, LPs come to me with, other deals saying like, hey, you're offering me a 20 or 22% IRR on my money. This other guy has another development deal. He's offering me a 45 IRR. And, I just have to say, well, look at his team, look at his experience, read the fine print, make sure that the development is also going to be appropriate for that area, because I've seen some people that, they put out a development deal and they're like, well, we're going to build a skyscraper in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, well, I mean, who's going to go rent a skyscraper in the middle of nowhere? Like that doesn't, just because you could do it doesn't mean that it's going to be feasible at the end of the day or that there's going to be a market for it. So, just make sure it's, make sure the project makes sense. It's close to an employment center. It's, something like that. Yeah, that's what I would say.
And so, as LP investors, we're most often at left field investors, at least the deals that we see are value add, already existing buildings type of things, and so a lot of us, especially me included, we're not super familiar with development and how to kind of vet the operator on that. So what kind of questions should we be asking the operator? Not necessarily just about the project. We'll ask that in a second, but just when I'm talking to you as an operator that's new to me, what kind of questions should I be asking you to make sure that, as you said, they know what they're doing, and then we'll get to the project next to make sure that they understand that project. But what basic questions do we ask the operator when we're vetting an operator?
When you're vetting an operator, look to their past projects, ask for past projects. Now, whether they have sponsored those deals themselves or they have been a part of other deals in some capacity, those are questions that I always like to ask. When I started my first big development deal, I didn't have 20 years of experience doing it. It was my first deal, but I could point to my track record saying, hey, I've worked on construction defect lawsuits. I've worked on reconstruction projects. I had also even briefly worked for a time as a project manager on a couple of other ground up development deals. So, I had that in my background. So that's a great way to vet an operator, is really looking at their background, even their education. If somebody has, a degree in real estate, that might not necessarily translate to real world experience, but, if they've got that and some experience, that could be more of a winning combination. The other thing that I also like to look at and ask the operator is how they are being paid. Because there's a couple ways you can get paid as a developer. One is to, be a fee developer, where you're just developing for a fee. The other way that you can get paid is being paid based on success. So if you complete this deal, you get a cut of the profits. Most of the deals that I do are based on success. So, there may be a small acquisition fee for getting the deal, kind of closed and over the finish line, but I don't typically take development fees because I want to make sure that I'm aligned with the investors. I could imagine no worse situation than, a deal going south and me saying, hey, well, I made, this $500,000 development fee and whoops, you lost your money and I couldn't get it done. It's like, well, what are you paying for then as a passive investor? So that's another thing that I at least like to put in, that's how I like to structure my deals, just to make sure, passive investors feel comfortable, like, hey, we're going to put this money in, to fund this project. But, if something happens and you don't do your job, you can at least rest easy knowing that that person's not walking away with a cent of money going into their pocket if they've messed it up. And, I'm confident in every deal that I do. So, I know I'm going to get paid at the end because I'm going to get it over the finish line. So making sure that the sponsor is aligned, making sure that they disclose any fees that they're getting or any payments that they're getting, I think is also an extremely good way to vet operators. It's basically put your money where your mouth is. As a passive investor, you want to go in and, I want you to go in and put money into this deal. Well, I'm willing to not take anything until you get your money back and you get paid. And I think that's one of the biggest things that'll weed out a lot of people that are just looking to make a quick buck. If, they're saying, I'm not going to get a paycheck until this is done. So I think those are kind of the keys to vetting a sponsor is compensation. How are they being compensated and what is their experience?
Left Field Investors is a community dedicated to limited partner investors who are interested in building wealth through real estate investing. The community is focused on education, networking, and engagement with quality operators and partners. We provide tools, webinars, and a forum where members can discuss everything related to real estate investing, including deals, operators, investment strategies, and much more. Coming soon, we're adding a new tool, Sponsor Reviews. This will be a place where our members can rate and review operating partners to further help each other in our investment journeys. Check us out at leftfieldinvestors.com. Have a deal in mind and a group of investors ready to go? Use TribeVest to pull your capital together through a multi-member LLC. TribeVest has streamlined the group investment process, making it easy, quick, and safe to do business with others. Start a tribe and invite your partners to join. Then you can use the platform to collaborate with your partners, pool capital, and manage your joint investments. I'm in 12 tribes myself. It is a great way to learn from others, spread risk, and get into deals at lower minimums. Go to tribevest.com to get started today. What about partners? Because again, I'm comparing everything kind of the standard deals that we look at where the building's already there and you're just managing it or maybe doing some upgrades. But I would imagine if you're doing ground up development, you're going to have all kinds of different subcontractors that you're working with and perhaps other partners. So what kind of questions do we ask to find out about what partners you're working with, and how do we vet those partners that are working with you and those partners that are working for you and under you as subcontractors?
So part of vetting the sponsor would be making sure that everybody that's on the GP team or the sponsor team. So that would include your key principal if there is one, your lead developer, and anybody else that is associated there. Make sure you know who is doing what role, because I know even in the existing value add syndication space, there can be a lot of people on a GP team, but not everybody is doing everything. So you want to make sure that the person that can do whatever position that they're in can actually do that. There's a lot of people that'll say, "Oh, I'm a GP on 10,000 doors," but I mean, they don't do much, or they have a very limited role, and or maybe they get some GP for having brought in their own capital or something. And if you handed them a 10,000 door portfolio to asset manage, they'd fall flat on their face. So you want to make sure that the person in each role is actually qualified to be in each role. And then as far as subcontractors and your team that's working under you, ask for the names of those professionals, and you should be able to check those folks pretty quick and see their business reputation online, see the size of their business, make sure that they've got good reviews, there's not a bunch of complaints on there. Like the civil engineering firms that I work with the most often are WGI and Pape Dawson. WGI is a nationwide firm. Pape Dawson is a Central Texas firm, but any investor can just Google those names and pull them up and see that, like, okay, yes, these are large, these are reputable firms. It's not just, some guy working out of his home office where he could have a heart attack and then, your project's really messed up. I think, especially on a larger project, my preference is always to work with a larger firm, because then I know that there is a support staff behind those professionals. If somebody gets sick, somebody gets pregnant, somebody gets hit by a car, whatever happens, that firm can bring in a replacement to pick up on that project. One of the things you'll find with, engineers or architects is nobody wants to come into a project halfway. So if you have, a single, and if you're getting a small engineering firm to do your civil engineering, and it's one guy, and, he has a heart attack, or there's a falling out with, ownership or something like that, and you decide, don't want to work with this guy anymore, no other engineer is going to come in and put their stamp on somebody else's drawings. They're going to want to start from scratch, which is going to be a whole new contract. It's going to be more money. It's going to be more time. You don't want to find yourself in that position. Whereas if you work with a large firm and your project manager isn't cutting it, or, whoever on that team isn't cutting it, you can just call and say, I don't like this project manager, get me somebody else. They're not hitting timelines. They're not hitting KPIs, replace them. And I've had to do that before. So it is a real thing that happens. I've had several project managers that I didn't like, and I went to their higher ups who I have a relationship with and said, get me somebody else on this project. The timeline is slipping. We need to get back on track. You can't do that with a smaller firm. Now, a smaller firm may give you a better price, but when you're talking about investor money and security, I would rather pay a little bit more for that service and know that it's going to be solid than trying to, get the cheapest, cost I can on everything and something goes awry and it's more risk for the LPs. That's not a good position to be in.
That's a great overview. And then when we're trying to analyze the deal, can you go through and maybe use an example? I don't know if you're doing, apartments, townhomes, whatever the project is. What questions do we ask the operator once we've kind of vetted the operator? We're like, okay, we're interested in possibly doing a development deal with you. What questions do we ask about the specific deal to understand what's happening and what the risks are?
So you want to if you're talking about entitling, basically raw land or semi-raw land, you want to know what status that land is currently in. Is it completely raw, just like farmland with an ag exemption? Has it already been zoned? Is there already a site plan on it? Are there already some kind of plans? Like, where is the land, first of all? Because, does it need to be annexed into a city? Does it already have access to utilities? Because, land that doesn't have access to utilities you're going to be severely limited on what you can do there. Land that needs to be annexed into a city or jurisdiction to get utilities, that's a big risk, is trying to annex that land in, because the city or the municipality may try to impose some kind of restrictions in order to give you access to utilities. Zoning is a huge risk there. If you need to either initially zone or rezone the land, that's another risky thing that takes time. So you want to know exactly where the project is starting from. And once you know that, you also want to get the timeline and know that there are delays in development. Like every single project that I've done, there have been delays on. And the way you mitigate that is you make sure that there is a good amount of contingency timeline, or buffer time is what I call it, to account for those delays, because they're going to pop up. Cities can be annoying to work with. You have to go and schmooze them. You got to deal with city council. You may have to have another round of comments. They may come back and want you to completely change something. So make sure that the timeline is appropriate there, and that you have that extra time, because you don't know exactly when the delays are going to pop up or what they're going to be about. You just know that they're going to happen. So, for instance, if everything went perfectly here, in Texas, it would take, let's say, 12 to 14 months to entitle a multifamily project. I would put a 2-year timeline on that, and that's what I do, because I know something's going to pop up somewhere. Some guy at the city is going to go on vacation and not be able to be reached for 3 weeks. Some, person on city council is going to have a little power trip and want you to change something. Whatever little thing is going to pop up, or, maybe the city has some, something that you didn't catch in the code. I had one project where we had been told by the city that we could submit our civil construction documents and our architectural construction documents at the same time. The person that told us that at the city got fired. Their replacement came in. There was, I guess, something in the code that honestly we had missed that said you can't submit your architectural plans until you've received the first round of comments on your civil plans. So, that, not a big deal, but it is a 30-day delay. Now, we had 12 months of contingency built into that project, so it didn't do anything. And we always factor the LP returns based off of using the entire timeline, with my thought being, hey, I'm going to calculate the returns assuming I'm going to have to use every dollar of contingency and every minute of contingency time. And if I get it done on my internal schedule, well, great, I've overperformed. But I don't want to go tell an investor, yeah, I'm calculating your returns off of 14 months. But, oh, no, we got delayed. And even though I told you that there may be delays, it's bumping your returns down and you didn't realize it. So make sure that you know what the timeline is, and make sure that there is contingency time built in and that there's also contingency built into the budget, make sure your returns are calculated off of using all of that contingency, because that's why it's there. You're going to assume that you're going to use it. And I think those are the biggest things. If you vetted your sponsor and know, or trust that you have a good sponsor, if the sponsor has a good professional team behind them to, get all of that work done, if you've got a good timeline that, has an appropriate amount of time for completing the project and also includes contingency, and you've got good contingency in your budget, and your LP returns have been calculated off of using all of your contingency dollars and your contingency timeline, that's probably a pretty solid project if you've hit all of those points of vetting.
And how are returns structured in these deals? I mean, these aren't cash flow deals, right? Because it's going to take several years before the thing is built, whatever it is. Let's say it's multifamily or townhomes or something. So then do you refinance into a standard loan, return capital plus gain? Then are you operating the building or whatever it is? So then there's cash flow after that. How are the returns? And I assume that the returns should be greater because there is more risk and there's more of a lag before you get those returns. So they should be greater than standard cash flow deals. But can you just talk about how the returns are structured, any refinances and other things that might happen along the way?
Yeah. So in terms of returns, there's a few different ways you can do this, but the way I typically do it is, I'm very upfront, like there's no cash flow. Money is going to be returned at the end of the project. I'll either do a straight split with the investors, or I'll do, there will be a preferred return, which isn't paid out, but it will accrue. So that way the and that's again, part of what I said about the sponsor not getting paid until the investor has been paid. So the way I would structure it is, there's a preferred return on it. Maybe it's like a 10 pref or something like that. So when the project is completed, the investor gets paid out their preferred return. They get returned their capital, and then there's a profit split between, the passive investor and the developer. The returns should be greater. I agree with that. Typically, when I do a development deal, I'm generally targeting, a 20 to a 23 IRR, somewhere in there for the LPs. Whereas when I'm doing more of a cash flow deal, that's more of a, 16 to 18 or 16 to 20. Somewhere in there. But yeah, make sure the investor is taken care of. A pref often accomplishes that. There are some people that, try to pay out, a pref during development or something, but because there's no cash flow, that just means you have to raise more money up front, and that dilutes the returns for everybody. I would rather just be upfront and say, hey, it's an accrued pref, but your return is going to be higher, than try to meet, some standard of cash flow that just simply doesn't exist. The other thing that I like to do is try to have multiple exits in a project. And by multiple exits, I mean breaking up the project into a series of different phases instead of one long project. So if I were taking land that was raw through a completed, let's say, multifamily asset, generally what I would try to do is, like, the first phase would be acquire the land and get it entitled. Then you have an exit at that point. Your LPs have the opportunity to continue into the second phase. They would get the right of first refusal to buy into the second phase, but there is a liquidity event there where they can get capital out. Maybe it's something like, let's say they invested 100K. There's that capital event, they get 150K back. Maybe they say, I'm going to take my 50K of profit and I'll reinvest my initial 100K into the second phase, or some combination of that. Some people realize that development isn't for them, and they just want to cash out, and that's fine. But then typically after construction is completed, you would either have a refinance into a permanent loan. So you'd be refining out of your construction loan and into a permanent loan, or you can do another capital event at that time where you sell that completed asset to a company that's going to hold it. And it can be the same sponsorship team on each 3 phases. But that's also a way for the sponsor to not get paid until the end, right? Like, it's going to be really hard for somebody to work to develop a multifamily project where they're not going to get any kind of money for like 6 years. If you can build in a couple exits where the sponsor can also take some profit, they're also going to be incentivized to continue wanting to do that project. But you know that it's still contingent on performance, right? They're not just getting money whether the project's going anywhere or not. I find that that's also helpful because it's shorter project lengths. Maybe each phase is about 2 years. So you're not saying to an LP, okay, here, come invest in this deal. You're not going to see anything for 6 years. Most people don't like that. It's much easier to say you're going to have a capital event after 2 years. You can make a choice to reinvest for the next phase. And if you do, there will be another capital event after another 2 to 3 years. And you can make a choice whether to invest again. And then there will be another capital event. It provides a way to get out, if there's ever, partnership disputes or things like that, which unfortunately do happen in this space. There's a way for everyone to get out, for the LPs to get out at the end of a phase, instead of saying like, oh, things broke down with the partners partway through what should be phase 1, but you're stuck all the way through phase 3 because you didn't plan an exit midway. So I just find that mitigates a lot of risk. It's a good incentive for the sponsor. It's a good way for LPs to get out if they want to get out, or they have a time in which they know they can get out. I find that de-risks deals a lot.
And how does that, for example, the first exit, like how would that work? Are you selling then you entitle the land and all that, and then you're going to develop it? So you would do that first one for 2 years, get everything ready to be developed, and then you basically sell it to yourself, and then you have to go raise capital for the second phase separately. Is that kind of how it works? Then the third phase would be, well, the project's done, so then you're not selling it to yourself as much as you're refinancing and returning capital, or do you sell it to yourself again?
Going from the construction to holding a final asset, it can be either one. You can either do a refinance or you can sell it to yourself. But yes, from phase 1 to phase 2, you are basically selling it to yourself. I mean, that's disclosed to the investors, and you would do it at a fair market value, or, if there's a price that's been pre-agreed upon with, all the LPs and all the members, you could do it that way. But, what your underwriting looks like is like, hey, I entitled this land, it's worth $5 million now, we're selling it for $5 million. And then your phase 2 would just show on the underwriting, okay, well, we've acquired it for $5 million, right? So it is a sale there, and you can do that from phase 2 to phase 3 also. If you, and yes, you do have to go raise more capital potentially, but if a lot of your investors in phase 1 want to just continue into phase 2, you might not need to raise that much capital. But I do like giving people the opportunity to exit the deal if they want to, for whatever reason. If they don't, development's maybe not for them. Maybe they need the money for a different investment. Maybe something has happened personally, that they need funds for, whatever that could be. But it's heartbreaking to be in a deal as a GP and somebody calls and says, oh my God, my wife got cancer, I need my investment back. And you're like, I don't know what to, I don't want to tell you no, but I can't tell you yes either. It's like, my only option is to tell you you're going to take a big haircut. And I don't like saying that, so having that pre-planned exit, you can at least say, like, hey, here's where the project ends, if you can, hold it out for another, 8 months, 10 months, whatever, like, you're going to get your capital back and you can go and do what you need with it.
Excellent. Well, that was a very thorough overview of development, which again is kind of new to me. I haven't done a whole lot of it, and same with a lot of in our community. We're more focused on the cash flow, but it's always nice to have a little bit of this development in your portfolio for some percentage of your investment. So that was great. The last question I always ask is, what's a great podcast that you like to listen to?
Yeah, I'm a fan of the Best Ever podcast and the Bigger Pockets podcast. So I've listened to those quite a bit. So I find a lot of good advice on there.
Yeah, excellent. I agree. We'll put those in the show notes. And then finally, if listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about IronGall Investments, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, they can reach me by email, either andrew@irongallinvestments.com or andrew@distance3development.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Also, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook as well. So shoot me an email, drop me a private message. Always happy to chat.
Excellent. I will put that all in the show notes. And again, thank you very much for being on the show. We appreciate you.
Definitely. Thanks so much for having me.
Investing in syndications can be a daunting task. Wiring a large sum of your hard-earned money to someone you talk to on the phone for 30 minutes can certainly be scary. How can you be confident in what you're doing? Steve Sue, one of the founders of LFI, just published a book called Avoiding Rookie Errors as a Left Field Investor. 20 lessons learned from 14 years of investing in private syndications. This is by far the best book I've read on syndication investing. It's an easy-to-read book, chock full of great advice from Steve's experience as a passive investor. It is a must-read. Whether you're a first-time passive investor or a veteran, go to www.leftfieldinvestors.com/books and click on the link to Avoiding Rookie Errors as a Left Field Investor. If you are a passive investor, you got to read this book. Visor provides investors with a secure platform that displays a comprehensive view of all of their holdings on a single, holistic dashboard. From real estate syndications to private equity, crypto to traditional investments, with AI-driven, unbiased, honest insights to maximize return, Visor is your one place to rule them all. Automating performance tracking, projecting future cash flow, analyzing all your financial documents, and much more in one powerful solution, making it easy to follow the money. Sign up for a free 30-day trial now at Visor.co. Well, it was certainly an interesting conversation. I don't do much development, and so I'm not super experienced there. So it was really nice hearing from Andrew all of the ins and outs of development and how to analyze a deal, vet an operator, all that. A couple of things that stood out for me is when you're vetting the operator, of course, you're looking for experience and track record, the same stuff we do on the standard cash flow deals that we do. But, you really have to focus on the fees. And he does based on the success of the project, which I think is great because you, as he said, you don't want to pay him $500,000 development fee or acquisition fee up front, and then they're like, oops, the deal didn't work. You want to, obviously they need some money to keep their operations going, so there are some small fees up front, but you want most of their payment to be based on the success of the project, which makes perfect sense, especially for development. And then another thing, you need to find out about the partners, and we talk about that, find out about the other GPs, make sure you understand them, and that makes sense, but you got to add some stuff here. You got to find out about the subcontractors, especially architects, engineers, those types, because as Andrew said, if something happens and they aren't able to finish the project, the architect or the engineer, you got to hire somebody new, and they're going to start from scratch. They're not going to sign off on someone else's deal. So you want to make sure you understand who they're using and that they're experienced. And, he recommended a larger firm, so you're not dealing with a one-person operation where something happens, you have a single point of failure. And then you also, when you're looking at the deal, you really got to look at the status of the land. There's zoning, there's entitlements, there's all these things that are going to happen that have to be done with the land. And so it's a little bit more complicated than our standard, cash flow deal where everything's already done and you're just messing around with a building. Really, this is, you're putting the building up. So you got to make sure you're going to the city and you have zoning and entitlement. So that's a lot of the evaluation you need to do, is to make sure that they understand how to do that. They know what they need to do. And you need to know what the status is. Does it already have utilities or not? And all those. So those are some great questions to ask. And then I liked how Andrew talked about the contingency timeline, right? He said none of the projects are going to go according to the timeline. So you want to make sure that your operator builds in buffers in case, something doesn't go through at City Hall and you got to, reconfigure something. And he said that happens all the time, which makes sense. And then lastly, exiting in phases. I really like that because you get paid along the way. As he said, if it's a 6-year project, man, that's a long time to wait to be paid, but you're paid after, maybe a year or two in phase 1. And then there's phase 2. You can choose to go in or out of each phase. So I really like how he phrased that. But it was super interesting. As I said, I don't do much development because I like cash flow, but there is a place for development in your portfolio. And I thought Andrew explained a lot of that really well. So really enjoyed this episode. I hope you did as well. That's all we have for this time. We'll catch you next time in the left field. Thanks for hanging out in the left field with us today. If you are interested in becoming a left fielder, you can find us on the World Wide Web at www.leftfieldinvestor.com and click the subscribe button to join our community. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to the show on your podcast player so you don't miss an episode. If you really enjoyed the show, a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts would be appreciated.
This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be considered financial advice. Before making any decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Passive Investing from Left Field and Left Field Investors. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.